Well, ladies and gentlemen, day 3 is in the books at Indianapolis, and today was quite an interesting day, as the last day before Fast Friday. You obviously had teams going out and doing 4-lap qualifying sims. You also had a lot of people doing some race running, trying to get some experience in traffic, going out and doing 20-30 lap runs to try to get some experience in the draft. So, let's go ahead and pop straight into results. First up is just the overall results, and first up again is Takuma Sato, who, again, in happy hour, put up the fastest time of the day with a 227.519. Second up was Scott Dixon with a 227.335. Third, David Malukas with a 226.869. Fourth, J.R. Hildebrand with a 226.846. And fifth was Jimmie Johnson with a 226.409. Now, within that leaderboard, again, I had talked about Takuma hitting the top of the board at happy hour. Scott Dixon's 227.335, he had set very early on in the day, and for quite a lot of the day, it was 1.3 miles an hour faster than anyone else on the charts. And really near the end was when you started seeing those other times show up, kind of within the last couple of hours at happy hour, whatever, were when those other times started to show up, which again mirrors what happened on Tuesday. So very interesting to see these kind of weirdly repeating trends of kind of the way things work. Other things of note within there, David Malukas in the top 5. I believe he was 6th or 7th in the practice on Tuesday, so good to see that coin. Looks like they are pretty competitive again. That's a generally common thing at Indy. Whenever that comes around, seems like coin always goes from kind of running around near the back to being right up at the front, which we can see with David Malukas and actually with his half teammate Takuma Sato. Next was J.R. Hildebrand in P4, which definitely odd to see him there, especially in a Foyt car. It's been a while since we've had a Foyt car at the top of the charts, so really cool to see JR hit near the top of the board right at the end of practice. That was on it was just a 1-lap thing. Obviously, I don't think this is any major indicative sign of some great success with a race car, but considering that team, they're probably not going to be right up at the front of the field in the race. So seeing some good times within the pack is, I guess, good to see from Foyt. And 5th, Jimmie Johnson, who, again, is in the top 5. Good to see Jimmie up there. Obviously, going into the month, there was still some questions over whether or not Jimmie was in a little bit over his head, or, whether you'd have Jimmie really being able to shine, or Jimmie kind of being relegated to near the back. But it's very obvious at this point that Jimmie Johnson is up near the front and there to stay. So good to see that Jimmie is, able to keep up with the cars around him. I'm going to go ahead and talk about some more detailed results here. So, first thing to talk about, as we were just talking about with Jimmie Johnson, is that Chip Ganassi was doing a lot of race running. I think every single one of their cars had gone over 100 laps, which wasn't a thing a lot of people did in this session, but that was something that seems like Ganassi was really wanting to get a lot of race running in. So interesting to see Ganassi doing that. As for driver results, you had Marcus Ericsson 7th, Palou was 20th, and Tony Kanaan was 29th. So a little bit kind of spread throughout the field there with the different Ganassi cars. Interesting to see Palou that far down. You'd think that it seems like Palou at this point is the second Ganassi driver, and I think after watching them racing in the pack, that still seems to be the case, that Palou's the second fastest, if not the fastest Ganassi car in the general span of traffic. But it's interesting to see him down there in 20th. Looks like maybe he just didn't get a good toe lap up or something. but interesting to see that there. Let's go ahead and move on to no-toe times, which this is going to be more indicative of what's going to be happening over the next 3 days with Fast Friday, Saturday qualifying, and then Sunday with the Fast 12 stuff. So fastest in the no-toe times today was Will Power with a 224.325. Second was Rinus VeeKay with a 224.047. Third, Ed Carpenter with a 223.858. Fourth, Alexander Rossi with a 223.656. And fifth, Scott McLaughlin with a 223.613. Now, out of this chart, there's a couple of things I want to note immediately. Is first of all, Ed Carpenter Racing is up there as always. I think it's pretty reasonable to expect at this point that Ed Carpenter is going to be up there when you look at the no-toe times. Connor, the only other car that wasn't on the no-toe charts in the top 5, Connor Daly was 8th in no-toe times with a 223.439. So it looks like they're up there big as always. Second, and more of a kind of indicative of some surprises for the next couple of days for qualifying, is that Penske's up there. So I think the main takeaway from that is that Penske has gone from last year, where they were bottom of the no-toe times and eventually bottom of qualifying, and Power almost missed the field. They've gone from that last year, almost missing the field, with Will Power and I guess Simone Di Silvestro too, to now being top of the charts. So it looks like Team Penske and I guess Chevrolet as a whole have stepped up their game a bit this year. Last year it was a lot of Hondas up at the top of qualifying, and this, at least just in this practice, you had only one Honda with Alexander Rossi up there. Joseph Newgarden. I was trying to mix Scott McLaughlin and Joseph Newgarden. Joseph was 7th in no-toe times with a 223.461. So, again, just outside of the top 5 there. So interesting to see that it looks like Chevy, at least for qualifying, is going to be at least up there, if not possibly even the team to watch for pole. So we'll get more of a gauge on that tomorrow when they crank the boost up, but still is interesting to see with those no-toe times that Penske is pretty well up there. So that's, of course, good to see. Looking at some other things that I've noticed throughout here, Andretti Autosport, they didn't exactly do a lot today. If you're looking at Alexander Rossi, obviously he was up there in the no-toe times. He only did 50 laps, which was one of the lowest numbers out of this entire chart. It's odd to see. There wasn't really much of a very obvious motive for Andretti. It seemed like Penske was really trying to get some good qualifying times up. Ganassi was trying to work on their race stuff, and really Andretti didn't exactly have a very obvious motive for what they were doing. The fastest Andretti car, just looking at the actual pure Andretti cars, was Marco Andretti in 15th. He was 28th in no-toe times, so it looks like he didn't get a very good run. Colton Herta, right behind him in 16th, was 10th in no-toe times. And then moving on down the chart, you've got Romain Grosjean, who we'll talk about later, was 31st in no-toe times. And Devlin DeFrancesco was 32nd and 9th in no-toe times. So just kind of randomly split throughout everywhere. Obviously, you had Rossi in the top 5 for no-toe times, but guys like Marco and Roman weren't even anywhere close, which I assume just means they didn't do a quali sim, but they didn't do a big race sim either. They had a couple of times where all the Andretti cars came out and did stuff, but there wasn't like any, dedicated 30 laps of all 6 Andretti cars get in a pod and go out for a while and then do that a couple times. That just kind of happened, once or twice. I think they had one time that it seemed like they had planned something, but I don't know. There wasn't exactly a very obvious motive for what Andretti was doing today. The other 2 Andretti affiliated cars, which were Simon Pagenaud and Elio Castroneves, Pagenaud was 9th, 13th in no-toe times, and Elio was 22nd overall, 12th in no-toe times. So at least looking at the no-toes, it looks like the Meyer-Shank guys are really close together, which is a thing I've noticed a lot throughout the past week or so. It seems like whenever I look at the scoring, Meyer-Shank is always right near each other, which I guess means that the drivers are pretty even on pace, which is good. Obviously, on the chart, it looks like Pagenaud probably had a better toe lap, but of course, there's not much you can judge that for right now, unless that's just them generally being faster, which, again, it's a one-lap time. It's hard to judge. It is kind of hard to judge in practice sessions in general what the actual trend of events going on is. But anyways, I'm going to go ahead and move on to just some other big things throughout today, which is, first of all, quali sims. A lot of teams, as we were talking about earlier with Penske and the Carpenter guys, were going out and doing full 4-lap qualifying sims. Part of the reason for that is just, it's getting close to Saturday and they'll want to work on that. But the other part of the reason was actually that there's supposed to be some pretty messy forecast for tomorrow. It sounds like winds in the 20 or 30 mile an hour range and possibly some big heat too. So not exactly indicative of what you're going to have for qualifying, especially considering that on Sundays it's supposed to be in the 60s. So going out and practicing in 90 degrees and 30 mile an hour wind, probably not the best thing. So what teams are trying to do is get closer to the weather conditions for Sunday and try to go out and do sims today. So I'd say more than you'd normally get on Thursday, where you had teams going out and doing qualifying sims. Yeah, so it's interesting to see that. It doesn't exactly surprise me, but I really wonder how much not having the boost can affect the accuracy of the qualifying sims. Obviously, I think the main concern would be, you're just going faster, you're either going to need more downforce, or the car's going to be able to turn better, or something to get around the corners that you generally wouldn't be able to get around if you were just driving the car the exact same way with 8 extra miles an hour of, speed or whatever. So, yeah, it's interesting to see teams doing runs today. Another thing, we talked earlier about Andretti not exactly having a very obvious motive for today. Andretti seemed to be kind of scrambling around. You had Marco, who went back to the garage and did a long sit in there while they worked on setups, and there were apparently other times where Andretti cars had gone back to the garage for a decently long time and fixed stuff on setups, which to an extent understandable if you're trying to go back and forth between something, but it's odd to see that just kind of happening. It seemed like there was a lot of, this or that Andretti car is in the garage changing setups. So very interesting to see that. Speaking of Andretti cars, we're going to talk about Romain Grosjean, who had a bit of a wild day today. So there were, I believe, 3.5, depending on how you count it, separate incidents in which Grosjean had a bit of a crazy time, and they ended up taking him off the track. So the first time was going into turn 1. It looked like at the exit of turn 1. Grosjean just had a bit of a loose moment. Car got a bit sideways, and then he obviously rear-ended the car, almost hit the wall, just kind of split up a bit, and Romain went and kept on going. Obviously, he didn't hit the wall today at all, which is kind of surprising, but didn't happen any. There was another incident, I believe, in turn 2, where he had hit the inside curb, I guess, concrete, and again, the back end got really loose. If you hit that concrete, you're lucky to not hit the wall. So, again, Grosjean hit the concrete, and that messed the back end up, and he almost spun again. And then, right near the end, this would have been last 30 minutes or so, he had 2 back-to-back incidents where he almost hit the wall at the exit of 2. He was about this close to hitting the wall at the exit of turn 2. Now, the funniest thing, they were talking about on the broadcast how, you know, if you have incidents like that, you'd end up going back to the pits and talking with the team and figuring out, you know, what caused that, what's wrong, what do I need to fix, what do I need to drive differently, what do we need to change with the setup. It was interesting to see. Obviously, Romain's a 500 rookie, so understandable, but it was definitely interesting to see that after all of those incidents, there wasn't any situation where Romain just, like, pitted the car afterwards. There were situations where the team was like, okay, come on in, you know, box this time. But there wasn't any time that similar to, you know, what you generally think of, where, you know, a driver's like, oh, that's a big moment, I need to figure out what happened there. It's interesting to see that Romain seems to have a bit more aggressive, not exactly aggressive, but more, you know, incidents can happen type of view with what was happening today, which is it's just interesting to see how many times that happened, that Romain almost wrecked, and he seemed somewhat unfazed by it, which I guess you know what they say is that there are two types of drivers at Indy, the ones who have hit the wall and the ones that haven't, and to this point, Romain is in the group of people that haven't. So hopefully he learned something from today, because the way he was driving, obviously you're not going to be able to drive like that in the race. So hopefully Romain's learned something. We can see a little bit less aggressive stuff. Some of it was just trying to figure out the line. When he hit the concrete, my guess is that he's just trying to figure out how low can he go before he, you know, almost wrecks the car. So, you know, it's the type of stuff you have to figure out if you're new. It's a bit jarring if you do it wrong, and it seemed like, to an extent, Romain pushed it a bit far. And then it was interesting, the last thing that we're going to talk about today, they kind of had an interesting moment in the last 2 hours of the practice, where, I mean, really for the last 2 hours, most of the teams were out doing stuff, because there was supposed to be rain on the forecast, you know, right at the end of practice. It would have been last 30 minutes or something. Now, it ended up holding off for the entire rest of practice, and finished all the way to 6 o'clock without getting any rain. But it made the last 2 hours really feel pretty urgent, because teams were still trying to get all their stuff done, and you had some pretty big groups going out for pack running. Still had some people trying to get no-tow runs out. So the last hour and a half, 2 hours were a little bit chaotic, but especially, you know, within the, I'd say probably hour and a half to an hour left. Once it got under that, it became more and more clear that you weren't going to get any rain before the end of practice, and teams kind of started to pack up like you would generally see in a long practice like that. But it was definitely interesting to see that, you know, we've already lost a day due to weather, and teams were, obviously, at this point, you know, once you lose that, teams are going to be looking for every 15 minutes of practice they can get. So, you know, seemed like teams were trying to work at a little bit of a faster pace to try to avoid the rain, even though nothing ended up happening, which is, I guess, good. So, that's about all I have for today. So it looks like Ganassi is probably going to be fast in pack running and race running, and look out for the Chevys in qualifying this weekend. Obviously, I'll have more news coming out about that every day, and Fast Friday tomorrow. So I'll see you guys after that. Let's get ready for some big numbers. So, thank you guys so much for watching. I'll see y'all then. Bye.